called to the colors. Okay. Now, I need to set the timeline for you so you understand what's been going on in this country. In 1776, I have to get my script out now. Hopefully I have put it back in the right place. Yes. So today I represent to you the information given to you by Isaac Quintard. He's a militia officer in the town of Stamford. To give you the background, from June 1776, if you were there, Congress is meeting in Philadelphia, receives a resolution from Richard Henry Lee urging Congress to declare independence. On June 11th, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, who was from Norwalk, Connecticut, Robert A. Livingston were appointed to a committee to draft a Declaration of Independence. The American Army retreats from Canada to Lake Champlain and Fort Ticonderoga. This is on June 11th, 1776. On June 12th through the 27th, on a request of the committee, Jefferson drafts a declaration that is the basic text of the original draft, known as the Jefferson Draft. On June 28th, a fair copy of the committee draft of the Declaration is read in Congress. Congress debates and revises the Declaration of Independence. Congress declares independence as the British fleet and army arrive at New York City. Danger is close. Congress adopts the Declaration of Independence in the morning of a bright, sunny, but cool Philadelphia day. So, to read to you the Declaration. In Congress on July 4th, remember 1776, a long time ago, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect the safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, most unwelcome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing free system of English laws in neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our legislatures, declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, in transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive in the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or fall by themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of the frontiers. In every stage of these operations, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only with repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be a ruler of a free people.
Hear, hear.
Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend unwarrantable jurisdictions over us. We have reminded them the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations which would invariably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, and in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent states, they will have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have right to. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of our divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Thank you. We are now, are we going to be ready to hear Elizabeth Cady Stanton? Also, I want to tell you, ladies in the audience, that there was one woman signer of the Declaration of Independence. She was the printer who signed at the bottom of the document. In January 18th, 1777, and she signed the true copy that was approved by Congress, and it's signed by every member, including herself. Thank you all. Now I gotta change microphones here.
Good afternoon, and happy July 4th. I am Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and I am with you this afternoon to share some of the history with you of the women's movement and my place in that history. Or, as some people in a more contemporary world and occurrence, people sometimes refer to this history as her story. Her story. I would like to share with you that I was born in the year 1815, and I was born into a family of considerable privilege and wealth. My father was an eminent judge in our community, and while my sisters and I enjoyed a life of substantial ease and privilege, we were never recognized as equals in a society whose rules and laws provided rights of free and independent citizens only to men. There have been many experiences in my life which brought me to activism and to a complete and committed energy to speak, to write, and to advocate for the rights of women, including, however not limited, to fighting for women to have the right to vote. Let me share with you some of the life experiences which brought me to a dedicated life of fighting for women's rights. One memory which will be with me forever occurred when I was a young child of only 11. My brother, Eliezer, had just completed his college education. Eliezer was the apple of my father's eye, and it was clear to our entire family that Eliezer was destined to lead a committed life, honoring his society and participating in his society, and clearly carving a dominant and dedicated legacy for the Cady family. Unfortunately, my brother Eliezer died, and my father was beyond grief-stricken at the news of his son's death. I clearly remember seeing my father in the darkened room where the casket, the mirrors, and even the pictures were all draped in white. My father sat alone in the room, deep in grief. I entered the room, and not feeling certain of what I should do, I slowly walked toward him and climbed onto his lap and rested my head against his chest and listened quietly to the beating of his heart. My father outstretched his arms and embraced me and said to me, "Oh, my daughter, oh, my daughter, if only you were a boy." That was not the only time my father expressed that sentiment to me, and you may wonder how that comment impacted me, not only that day, but through the years. It motivated me and energized me to try to do all that I could to fill that vacant space left so empty by the death of my brother. And it energized me to decide that I needed to speak out for the rights of women whenever possible. When I married, I threw caution to the wind and completely disregarded tradition. You see, at that time, I was married in 1840, and at that time there was a line in the marriage vows which asked the bride to state that she promises to honor and to obey her husband. That was completely unacceptable to me, and I insisted that phrase be deleted from our wedding vows, and so it was. In 1848, you may already know that a very eventful moment occurred. We met together at a Methodist church in Seneca Falls, New York. I see you nodding your heads because you do recall, even though perhaps you were not there in person, you know your history and you know that this occurred. This was the very first time in the history of the world that there was an active and open protest where women gathered to talk about women's rights and to advocate together for change. There were opportunities to discuss wages, property ownership, and sometimes even the need to discuss custody of our children, which sometimes resulted as a result of divorce. So we composed a document, and I was the main author of this document, which we call the Declaration of Sentiments. You will notice that in many ways it parallels statements that you heard in the Declaration of Independence. However, the difference is when we refer to he in the Declaration of Sentiments, we are not referring to the King of England. Rather, the he to whom we are referring are the men who hold power over us. This document details and explains the plethora of ways in which women's rights are subjugated and prevented due to the societal customs and legislative laws which are in place due to the men in power. In order to provide you with an understanding of the various premises of the purpose of the Declaration of Sentiments, I want to share with you a few of the statements included in our document. And so, I will share with you now some of these key statements. Understand, please, that in the 1800s, the following characteristics were expected of you as a woman. You were expected to be pious. You were expected to be pure. You were expected to be maternal. And last but certainly not least, you were expected to be completely dependent upon men. And so here are some of the key sentiments and statements within our Declaration of Sentiments. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation of which she had no voice. After depriving her of all rights as a married woman, if single, and the owner of property, he has taxed her to support a government which recognizes her only when her property can be made profitable to it. He has denied her the facilities for obtaining a thorough education, all colleges and universities being closed against her. Can you imagine such a world where you as a woman would not be permitted if you chose to seek higher education? He has endeavored in every way that he could to destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life. Now, in view of this entire disenfranchisement of one half the people of our country, their social and religious degradation, in view of the unjust laws above mentioned, and because women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of their most sacred rights, we insist that they have immediate admission to all the rights and privileges which belong to them as citizens of these United States. So let me be clear. Those of us who choose a path as a wife, as a mother, we treasure those roles. However, as a wife, as a mother, for example, I myself am the proud mother of 7 extraordinary children. However, as a wife and a mother, this does not preclude, nor does it prevent our need to have our own rights as citizens. Just as men who are husbands and fathers have other roles in life and additional rights as citizens, so too must women have these rights. Change does not come easily. We met in Seneca Falls in 1848. Now, I will share with you that I died in 1905. So I was not alive when the 19th Amendment, which dictates and makes official that women shall have the right to vote. However, I know my history, and I do know that the 19th Amendment was passed and ratified by all of the states. At last, 72 years after meeting in Seneca Falls, let me say that for you again. 72 years after our statement of the Declaration of Sentiments. 72 years. During those years, the struggle, the fight, the dedication to make change continued. Sometimes change is challenging. Sometimes people say, no, we mustn't. No, you can't. No, we will not change that. However, there were many of us who did not listen to those many no's. And indeed, the 19th Amendment was passed. And as you know, we as women cherish and celebrate the right that we have. That is our right to vote. So on this day, July 4, I implore you, let me rephrase that. I charge you, the struggle is not over. Wherever and whenever you see injustice, you must speak out. You must never accept the status quo if it means injustice to people, perhaps because of their sex, perhaps because of their color, or even perhaps of their position within this society. We can never consider ourselves a United States of America where freedom and justice is everything until freedom and justice prevails for each one of us. If one person suffers injustice, that indicates all of us are suffering injustice. So continue the struggle, continue the fight. It is not over. Thank you.